Live from WBN Radio, this is Derailed Trains of Thought.
It's kind of nice being here, live radio right now.
Hey, it's it's nice to be at a professional place for a change.
Yes,
and I mean, at least it seems professional.
People running around a little crazy. Something seems to be going a little wrong backstage, but
yeah, hopefully everyone's okay.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah,
it's an opening night, so maybe they're just nervous.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I mean, and the sound effects guy is kind of frazzled, but sound effects guys are supposed to be frazzled like that. That's just nature of the beast.
I'm excited to be here, though. You know, we learn probably something from this radio station for our own podcasting.
I hope so. Hopefully it will go just as smooth as it seems to be going here tonight.
Yep.
So, but how are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing very well, actually. It's been nice.
Finally getting to spring after a long winter.
Long winter.
But it was a nice April.
Speaking of long winters, I've been reading Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe to Theo.
Oh, nice.
He really enjoys it.
Now, Theo is 3 now?
4.
So
he doesn't. I mean, he really wants to read it, and he seems to understand the big ideas as long as we ask him questions, we go along.
Okay.
But he's always like, one more chapter. Like, yeah.
It's
cool.
Been fun. That's great to get to pass along about classics like that.
Yeah, he's been enjoying it.
Oh, cool. Well, anyway, now it's time for our project update. All right, so it's been a little while since we've done one of these. Who wants to go?
I guess I'll go first since you're coughing.
Yes.
Okay. Mainly what I've been doing for the first time in quite a long time has been working consistently on book 3 of Austrian Fred.
Yay!
Like every day I sit down and I write a page or two, which is pretty impressive for me. I mean, it's been many years since I've worked consistently on it.
We've heard you talk about, I'm really
I'm really on this podcast numerous times.
But no, that's pretty cool. So what have you been able to do? Like a chapter, 2 chapters a week? Or
I don't really know. I think I've written 10, 12 chapters since I've started working regularly. Now, Austrian Fred chapters, if you don't know, are pretty short. They tend to be 1,500 word average chapters.
Still long monologues in them?
Oh, yeah, sure. Especially Timothy this time.
And in case anyone doesn't know, Timothy was named before he ever met me.
That's true, yes. Timothy is a very poetic sort of minded character.
He tends to get rambly.
Yes. He's kind of sparring off with Soldano for the souls of the Horizon folk.
Fun.
Through story.
Through story?
Yeah.
They're doing a poetry slam?
Well, kind of, yes. Luckily, it's not a poetry slam because Timothy already has to go say poetry more often than I would feel like writing it. But
fun.
And then Fred's just been fun. He's been dealing with Kex, True Knight's previous girlfriend, who is very bitter at having been upstaged by Harmony.
Oh, interesting. And this is all while they're on their quest to find the cure.
They're kind of stuck right now, yeah. Because
they're stuck so they can have more monologues.
Well, what happened is that they're on their quest. They got to the link to as close as they knew where to go, and then they're in the city, and then they're going to get help from the town. Except the princess hates the trio because of previous experiences, so they have to deal with that issue before they move on.
Right. Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Complications.
Always complications.
Yep.
And Webby's gone. He's looking for. Well, he's not there right now, and no one knows where he is.
Ooh. Dun dun dun.
He's my Deus Ex Machina. So.
I see. Thanks for the hints there.
No, but it's been when it first. Well, I'll say that for later. But that's that.
Okay, and I suppose I should give some update for New Wells Rising, the next book in Children of the Wells, which is woefully behind schedule right now. I mean, I've made decent progress this month, or at least decent progress from my relative inexperience at writing.
He's getting good
schedule.
At squeezing blood from turnips. So.
Yeah, basically. But it's, like I said, it's at about 11,000 words right now. I had to, I turned 2 chapters into 5 somehow. But But it's moving along. But we'll get into more of that with our topic this week, which is very writer focused. Although I think other people will get something out of this. But let's get into Story School. All right, Story School. Today we are talking about outlines versus free form.
So as they say, pantsers versus outliners.
Yeah. What I think a lot of non-writers don't really realize is that not every writer outlines their story completely until not every story writes their story before they write their story.
And my guess is, and I don't know, because I use outlines more than I used to. I used to be, Steelheart Fred has always been largely outline in my head and then just write. Mm-hmm. And I've toyed with the idea of outlining it more, and I've always resisted it for that particular series because that's how I started. And I feel like there's a certain amount of danger and of looseness to Steelheart Fred that would change if I outlined it, I think. Now, that might be good. Maybe it's too rambly. But I figure, hey, I started that way. People like it that way. I'm going to keep it that way.
Yeah, once you're this far into it, you really can't change it.
Yeah, I mean, I could, but I think there's a whole continuum between people who they don't know anything, they start writing, and people who outline everything before they start. Mm-hmm. And I'm obviously on the pantser end with more outline. Like, I like to have I no longer like to start kind of, I have no idea where this is going. Mm. I like to start having some idea of, well, at least the next step and kind of what is the general arc of this book? You know, what do I want to accomplish, at least thematically, even if all my details change?
And certainly this varies depending on what sort of medium you're writing for. You can get away with this a lot more, I think, in a individual person's novel or, mm-hmm. A short story or whatever, with just the free form, you know, not knowing what's going to come. I actually heard this interview with his author, Stephen James, a few weeks back. He writes a lot of mysteries and thrillers and stuff. And he said that he usually has like an idea for his mystery, for his novels, but he said that even he oftentimes won't know who did the murder until sometime while he's writing it, which I thought was fascinating because I always assumed that mystery was like the one genre that you had to have it all outlined or figure it out. But he said he actually wound up changing who did it one time because he came up with an idea he thought was better than who he originally had thought
That's
committed
awesome.
it. So I was like, hey, kudos to that guy.
Interestingly, I kind of on accident, I didn't mean to relate to this podcast, but I listened to a 15-minute podcast by, it's Brandon Sanderson and some other writers, which I don't know their names, and I probably should. They call writing excuses, and then seasons of this, I guess. But they were doing kind of a quick answering people's questions. One was talking about, is it okay with not outlining? And they mentioned that sometimes, especially fantasy writers, if they don't outline, they tend to have character bloat. They tend to have too many characters. The story gets too big. And you can't do anything with it.
Right. Too much world building.
Too many characters doing different things, too many plot lines, which is probably not just in fantasy, but I think fantasy has a tendency to be, they want to change the world,
Sure.
And which I can kind of, which I understand it because Steelheart Fred obviously is a weird name for a book that has, multiple important characters.
How many, like 20?
Well, probably not important anymore. I'm weeding some of them out this book.
Ooh. You heard it right here, folks.
But I do think that you really do have, when you're making things up without much of an outline, you have to be careful about staying focused. That it's very easy to get derailed.
Not in a good way.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing I do have most times with Steelheart Fred. I have a very strong idea of here's kind of my general end point. Let's get there. And then you have to deal with all the, and I keep thinking, okay, I don't want to get too far out. First book, I just kind of created people. And then after the first book, then second book, because this is my first book I ever wrote, just kind of, I tried stuff.
Right.
And it kept adding characters. So, second book, then I gave them new purposes, started intertwining them a little better, because I felt like I needed to control all this stuff. I had to bring them back. Have a plot line where Selena's finally going to,
do something
and come back and, have everyone try to be semi-important. I mean, some people can't be. It's like on TV series. Sometimes the character is just useless for a while.
Yeah.
You know,
So would you say the first Strin and Fred book is sort of your revolution of books in a sense?
meaning
Referring to the revolution as
Our-
in our first serial
yes.
project you did.
yes, okay, I was making sure that's what you meant and that the audience knew. Okay, yes. I mean, it was very much, I did start that having no idea where I was going.
Wait.
I mean, I just made things up
Which
as I went.
The Revolution was one of Nick's first. I'm sure we've mentioned it before, but in case
we
you're a
have.
new listener, it was one of our first collaborative projects. Well, one of his first. I wasn't there when you started it, but you did with other writers, where each writer signed up for a chapter at a time, and no one had any plan for where it was going.
No.
Writers
No.
threw in new stuff all the time, that whether it related to the previous chapter or not.
And there's a lot of good ideas in it, and it's complete chaos.
Yes.
And the best chapters, in many ways, are the ones that would take all the random stuff and try to make sense of it.
Yeah, and actually try to tie it all together.
I mean, it was easier for me because I was one person, so I didn't have so many different things.
Right.
But I do remember very distinctly writing this chapter where Strin tells a story to Keck about the history of the horizon. And think in my mind, when I got that this story, I don't remember when I was writing it or after I wrote it or during I was writing it, that this story is an outline for the rest of the series.
Oh, interesting.
So because I at that point I knew I need focus. You know, before then, it's interesting. I'm the sort of person where when I'm making stuff up, I'll say, okay, here's something. I might come back to it. I have an idea where, you know, the shape of what, like, say, this character would be, or this, you know, I'm leave some name of some random historical fact. I have a shape of it in my head, but I don't say anything about it. So I can come back to it if I want and expand upon it, or I can just let it be there. You know, I don't feel compelled to make everything mean something. I just like to leave places where I can fill things in if I need them.
You're not like
Trapdoors.
So not everything in your book has deep underlying symbolism.
No, not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah.
They talk enough for that. So
So would you say, but you did kind of suggest that as you've gone, you tend to have some form of more of an official outline than maybe just the one that you have in your head?
generally, I found a lot of stories now. I do have. Well, it's been so long since I've done something brand new that was long. I've done a lot of shorter stuff, and I don't need outlines as much for that.
Okay, well then I guess...
But like, say, Girl Called Snort, one time, before it was finished, Girl Called Snort is a serial about a girl with a pig's face. And I started just making stuff up and asking for, you know, readers to give me answers to questions and stuff. And then it got stopped. And then I thought, well, I'd like to take this back up, and I was going to try to submit it to a place that serialized stuff, and I could make up as I went for them. And I made an outline for it before I had finished it, which was really, really hard for me. And then when and then they didn't accept it, and it dropped again for a couple years. And then when I rewrote it, I looked at the outline. I didn't follow it necessarily, but there was a lot of ideas in it that I'm going to use that. The Castle of the Blind, one of Tim's favorite section, where they're in complete darkness, they're in this castle. That's from that outline with the swords and everything.
Cool.
I don't think the river is. I think the river is completely new.
Yeah, that makes sense. You played with a lot of random ideas in Girl Called Snort, so it would be unfair to the story in some sense to try to outline it completely, because that's sort of your Alice in Wonderland type.
Yeah, exactly.
Story.
And a lot of my fantasy tends to be more that style than world building fantasy, and so I can get away with less in some ways.
Yeah.
But like Jonah Wells, which we've talked about here before, all our writers, we forced to make outlines.
Yes, which is, that is new.
And this is very new for us, but the reason is we have to make sense with each other.
Yeah.
And we have to know that the story, we have very kind of set ideas of every story has to have kind of an emotional arc and stuff. And, you know, if you're just writing for yourself, you can say, yes, of course it does. But when you're working with other people and other people who are working with you, everyone's got to be on the same page. And putting on paper, now, I don't think any of the outlines have turned out exactly like.
No, not really.
So, like, you've been writing, your 2 chapters turned into 5. Mm-hmm. So what happened?
Yeah, the first 2 chapters turned to 5. Well, I just found that as I was going, it needed more space, and we'll see what other people think of it when they actually get to it. But like, I kind of felt like, in retrospect, the first part of the outline, I was just kind of rushing through things, and then it got more detailed later in the outline as I had to. Either because I was wrestling with more characters, or I was curious enough to want to detail exactly how they got from point to point. Whereas in earlier on, I kind of had a pretty general idea in my head, and I was like, I'll figure this out as I get there. And then I realized later that it needed more time to be able to get there, which real quick, for people who aren't writers who don't quite understand, well, how come you don't? Because I hear some fans talk and they feel like, say, we'll bring in Lost here.
I knew you were gonna do it.
Okay, so people have Lost who like watch a show like Lost or some other thing that they want the writers to have everything planned out before time, and they'll be like, well, why isn't that kind of lazy to just have wait for things to come up? Why do that? Why? Because wouldn't that create more problems later? And to talk about why, I think it's not. I want to talk about something that's sort of side tangent, but it relates to writing in a storytelling sense. I heard this interview with Brian Henson related to the Creature Workshop. This was on the Nerdist podcast.
You got Lost and Muppets in so far.
Exactly, and we're doing good here. But he was they were talking to him about the process of making creatures and why they do it and all this kind of stuff, and particularly what's the advantage of live animatronic creatures over CGI. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Brian Henson pointed out is that in animatronics and puppetry and stuff, one thing that they're constantly trying to achieve is a sense of real life, of spontaneity. And with computer animation, you don't always have a sense of spontaneity because it always has to be choreographed. The movements have to be precisely and rendered.
They plan it way before. Yeah.
They plan it way before. And with a creature, you're able to get the spontaneity of life out of it. And you can see how it actually moves, and the performer can make decisions, in the moment.
On the moment.
It's like how we talked about last episode about that's why they do the digital puppetry with Sid the Science Kid. Mm-hmm. Henson Company is all about trying to capture that. Well, with writing, there's also a sense of that. There's certain things that you can't know until you get to until you're actually walking in the character's shoes, that you discover these things. But then also, if you're not able to be surprised as an author, then it's going to be a lot harder to surprise your audience in a sense.
Yeah, that's sometimes my excuse, and I don't know if it's a true one, but I think it is partly true. Why it took me so long to finish Unremarkable Squire. That one I had outlined. And I wrote, and then by near the end, I had been fulfilled with it. But I think more to the point, as much as you think you have an idea of how things can work out, especially if it's a complicated story, characters do things you don't know they'll do to get there. You think it sounds practical that so-and-so will choose left instead of right. And then you get there and you're like, making him choose left seems like you're forcing him to do it when he really doesn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Instead, he wants to set up camp. I mean,
right.
I mean, I remember just a couple when I first started this Austrian Fred work again. It was very hard because I had not written it for a long time, and I didn't. But I wrote a couple chapters. One or two of them might get completely cut by the end. And then I thought, oh, I got this cool idea, and I wrote this little mini outline. Kind of like 5 words and an arrow and 5 more words sort of outline. I'm like, this is my signpost for the rest of it. Seriously, within 1 page, I had changed one of those things. Because it sounded like a good idea in my head, and then when I got right down on the ground, I'm like, that's not what would happen. That logically doesn't make any sense. Uh-huh. At least for me, I'm very much a character writer. Complicated characters do strange things. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for me to, when I'm writing inside a character's head, I can say, things just happen. But trying to stand back and write, especially with as many characters as Austrian Fred, to write an outline, what everyone will do, and then have it work, this is why I resist writing outlines for something like that. That's something like Will's Orphan, where it's very
inner
people.
Monologue,
Like even that, this whole last third is different. Mm-hmm. Because when it got to that point, she was in a different place emotionally. She wouldn't work it out in the same way. I originally had her kind of just like half dead in depression, and then kind of like that. But I had a storm. You needed stuff.
Stuff to happen. She couldn't just be lying in an alleyway.
It sounded good in an outline, but then it lasted all of 2 sentences in the book. When sometimes you can write 2 sentences like you did, and you say, "Oh wait, this needs."
Yeah, because you have to. Yeah,
and maybe we're just not good at writing outlines. I don't know.
Well, it could be. It is a difference between summarizing what happens, like, okay, they traveled this journey, and then saying, well, but you can't just say they traveled this far. You have to say what they were doing while
I mean, I think the point stands that things change when you're down in the ditches. But I suppose, I remember reading, it's been a long time, On Screenwriting by J. Michael Straczynski. And when you write an outline, it's like a beat outline. You actually write, basically exactly what's going to happen without the dialogue
Mhm.
in many ways.
I think Robert McKee would agree with that approach a lot too. Like I remember in his book Story, he outlines like a scene from Casablanca. It shows beat for beat, what changes in the conversation. It's like, I mean, it could just be, it's the beat is maybe just one line between each character.
Yeah.
For each character each, and that's a shift of some sort in emotions and attitude of conflict, all that kind of stuff.
And especially when you're going to write a visual script, you need people to be, yes, this is going to make sense before you go down and get the details. I mean,
Yeah.
since we brought up Lost, I know when they're in the writer's room, they got like 8 writers in there and they work out the beats.
Mhm.
They don't have the dialogue yet, and then they give it to the person, and I'm sure it changes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, probably.
Then they know here's where the commercial break. I mean, you have a very solid structure.
True.
That you have to make work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
TV
got
writing.
6 acts.
Yeah.
and-
TV writing has a very specific thing. Although I have noticed sometimes, what was I watching? It might have been Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I forget now. But there was one where I noticed, because it was some show that I often watch online on Hulu, and you kind of learn to see where the commercial breaks are because they have those little dots on the outline where you see it's going to be. I noticed that like one was really different, like because a lot of times what you'll have long segments toward the beginning of the show, and then you'll have some short segments in between commercial breaks as things are getting wrapping up. Well, there's one where they had a very short. I think it was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because they had a very short segment earlier in the episode than they normally would. And I think that's because this was about a time when, massive changes are happening on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all kinds of crazy stuff was happening. So they knew they could get away with having the shorter break earlier on. And then later they could
have the time to
expand and kind of reflect on what all had happened, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was really interesting that they could change up the format that way.
Yeah. But you still have, I think you always have 6 acts, don't you?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, it used to be like when I read on screenwrite, it was intro, 4 acts, and tag, or teaser, 4 acts, and tag. Now I think the teaser and tag have become longer.
Okay.
And so they're official acts now.
Yeah. I know Arrow is very bad, and like they have some very, very short segments, especially toward the end of the show. I remember watching with my grandma. She'd be like, "We just had a commercial." That's because they're trying to really get you hooked and keep watching during that last act, or whatever it's called.
But I do find I find that I don't like to write things now unless I have some sort of longer things, unless I have some sort of ending in mind. Maybe the ending changes, but here's point A, here's point B, and it's good if I have a couple point C's and a couple things in the middle because that's usually where I get stumbled. But that's the hardest part for me to outline because sometimes and maybe I shouldn't, but sometimes I resist the outline for the middle because I want to figure it out. But then the downside is that you have a possibility of rambling, of searching for it for a while through the writing. And maybe if you're a good editor at least, you can search for it and then go back and strengthen. I guess that's the real advantage of the books, is that you can get away with just making it up on as you go.
That's true. Part of a good outline is building in enough flexibility in it to be able to change things as needed.
That's the crazy thing about, from what I understand about Babylon 5, he'd outlined into all 5 seasons before it started. Like general I think he had note cards of all the main points and stuff. And he had trap doors for all the actors that needed to get changed and stuff. So he understood that, like, here's the plan and here's plan B.
Right.
But I can't even imagine the show if Sinclair had been the captain the whole time.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it would look like.
Because apparently, and he knew that the captain needed to change too, because that captain wasn't going to do things that he needed to have the captain do.
But apparently, after season 4 ended, which was whole debacle anyways, because
they didn't know if the show was even. But
I guess in the hotel room at some convention, they cleaned his room and threw away his note card for season 5.
Ugh.
So he had to redo it from memory. I think that's some of the reason besides the fact that he compressed some of 5 into 4 anyways.
Yeah.
That 5's a very odd.
Right.
It's like, what is going, it finds itself, but it takes a while. It's like it's rebooting all over again.
Yeah, basically. Considering it was on a different channel at the time, it probably didn't help.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things for making season 5 different. But I mean, I have always thought that balance of outline, I don't know how much is good anymore because I haven't done a new long one for a long time, and freedom, I'd be very surprised if there's any really well-known, classic book that doesn't have some element of spontaneity, freedom to it.
Yeah. And I think we've done a pretty decent job of balancing outlines and spontaneity on Children of the Wells, too. Because, like I said, we do have all our writers do outlines, and that is tremendously helpful in making sure that they're following the rules of the world that we set up. And that it's all going to be coherent.
But the big picture is very loose at this point.
Yes, we tend to like push writers to go in a certain direction with the next book in a series, but we don't have any sort of big picture. I mean, well, we know of a big change that has happened in the world that not all the characters are even aware of yet. We know that's going on, but beyond that, there's a lot we haven't really,
And I think it pays, especially Jonah Well is probably the best example of this, but even when you write individual stuff, to have a good sense of what threads are in play.
Yeah.
And use those, build on those. Don't necessarily, when we're figuring out what's the next book at Children of the Wells, we say, look, here's very natural lines that we've created either purposely or by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pick this up and explore it.
Yeah. And that's kind of how we realize, I mean, we've made some really interesting discoveries along the way. Because, say the Jason series, the first book is Fall of the House of Kaiser, and then the next book is The Rules Change, and then my book is New Wells Rising. It's coming back up.
Yeah.
So I guess it's, in a sense, it's sort of a fall and rise in the reverse order sense. Not that he's going to be coming completely back to power, don't be looking for that, but he's definitely going to be in a much better position at the end of this book than he was at the beginning.
But yeah, I think having a real good sense of the pulse of your story.
Yeah.
And being able to figure out, does this fit? Freedom not meaning you can do whatever you want. It means that you're free to choose a better strand if you find it.
Yeah. A lot of times, yeah, you don't know what strands are going to be there until you're in the ditches.
I quote this in
trenches.
one of the... there was a question on one of the previous episode comments about... I guess Stephen King largely just makes stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
He'll scare himself writing his horror movie stuff. I mean, I think he doesn't plan almost at all, and I think some people don't much care for that. But I think he's on the far end of that. Let's see, go down to it's the one with 5, I believe. In episode 41. Okay,
Sharing an Eye. I think who's a friend of our longtime listener, Greg.
Okay, here we go. It just says this. As for losing the narrative due to various issues, do you guys think that this could sometimes be due to lack of preparation foresight? One author that comes to mind is Stephen King. This is him writing. Early in his career, he wrote many books assuming he would only write one and would not become a series. Thus, most likely didn't have one overarching plot or narrative already devised for the series. And he talks about that, and he says, basically, should you have a bigger, sometimes maybe we don't plan enough, and that's why series get rambly or they seem like they're shoehorned in. Here's the thing. If you're writing one book, write that book well, and then maybe don't write a sequel. No, but I always remember, and I commented back to him, I remember hearing when Flash Forward was on and then was having trouble and then kind of just ended in the first season or half a season or something like that Damon Lindelof of Lost, if we mentioned, said Flash Forward was required by the network to have a strong outline of exactly what the end was and everything because people were feeling burned by Lost. And Damon Lindelof said, it's good to know your big outline, but unless you're writing the best episode right now, it doesn't matter. And I think Lost people's theory was like, okay, here's our general idea, but if this episode demands this, we'll deal with the consequences of whatever that may be. And you can say whether... But the implication for me was that sometimes if you're so focused on sticking straight to your big idea, to your, here's my mega outline, and you're not willing to deviate, sometimes you just are kind of lifeless, kind of flat, kind of paint by numbers.
Well, let me ask you a question in relation to that. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had a big, they knew from the outs of their thing that they were going to have to deal with the ramifications of Captain America, which were huge for S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, that's an impressive tie-in.
Yeah, it's a very impressive tie-in. It's the one that they've really, they were pretty much forced to tie in that one very, quite a lot more than, say, Thor. But the cost of it might have been, I know some people were kind of impatient with the show when it first started. They didn't feel like the characters were all that interesting or taking a while to gel, or they felt like they were holding back on certain things and all this kind of stuff, which I don't know that I felt that to the same degree, but considering what you were just saying about having to make sure every episode is the best, do you think that maybe they put too many of their eggs in one basket?
Well, it's the problem with the first season in some ways, and I think even with Flash Forward, is that you're also trying to find your voice in a TV show.
Yeah, that's...
And I think some of the, like, I thought at first the characters didn't gel and they didn't quite work for me the first couple episodes. And I'm like, I don't know. And I don't know that was a flaw of them waiting because of the time. I think it's just one of those things that most TV shows have trouble with in the first couple episodes.
That takes a little while for the characters.
Not all
the
TV
actors,
shows,
yeah.
but many of them have a rough time of getting going. They have the, here's a cool idea. Plot, here's how I sell it to the studio, but how do I make it work week to week?
Well, yeah, and that's the tricky thing about TV too. I mean, you have a very limited time frame to make these episodes in the movie. I mean, for a movie like Captain America, you're working on Captain America for like 2 years.
Yeah.
In here, you've got 22 hours worth of stories to tell, and and you got to keep it coming.
So I do remember thinking the first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 episodes were just kind of like, I don't know about this. I'll stick around and see what happens. And then it seemed to really hit. And I don't know if that's a fault of them waiting for this S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, because they had this whole...
I mean, they had a lot of interesting things going on.
They had, once they got going in earnest with the clairvoyant and the project, the death lock, and all that stuff, then you had a storyline, and you got deeper into characters, and you saw more of the world, like going to their school, and I think it just took them a while to like get past kind of the bland. Here's what we do. Here's our. It's like X-Files Monster of the Week sort of deal, and maybe it was some treading water. Maybe they didn't know how to get started. Like we want to do this Captain America thing, but we can't yet, so we'll just kind of have them run around for a while. So I don't know. It's hard to tell just because
that is
first
hard
half
to tell.
season, some shows do a great job, and a lot of shows just take them 6 episodes.
Yeah, that's fair. I will nitpick a little bit on another superhero show on right now, and that's Arrow, which I know you haven't really been watching as much. So I won't say too much about it, except that recently there was a major twist at the very end of an episode. Which this ties back into our twist thing. After the fact, the writer said, we've had this plan for a while. This has been leading toward this and all this kind of stuff. But I kind of felt like it was an interesting twist, and I think it'll do interesting things for the show. But the correlation to that with the rest of the episode, I think could have been stronger. Because it involved the main bad guy doing something, but he hadn't really been... The rest of the episode had been kind of focused on... I mean, it was peripherally about him. Because he's been pulling a lot of strings, but you hadn't seen him make any other appearances. There was really no warning, so you could say, okay, well, that's a good surprise twist. You got me,
but it wasn't foreshadowed.
I don't know. I mean, I could be argued either way, but I kind of felt like
it could have been stronger.
It could have been stronger. I mean, it certainly served the purposes, but part of me was sort of like, well, why did the bad guy choose to do this now exactly?
Well, since we're talking S.H.I.E.L.D., that big twist.
Yeah,
I don't know what we should mention on spoiler.
Spoiler.
It's a couple weeks old.
It's a couple weeks old. If you haven't seen Captain America by now, then
but
you've been warned.
The one character, Ward.
Oh yes,
ends out to have been a
bad guy, a
Hydra the whole time. And at first, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to call foul or not. And then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, but he was trying to get in with this person and with this person, and it does kind of work.
It does, yeah.
And so, I mean, it was really shocking. I think it made a lot of people mad, but not in a bad way.
Yeah,
just
it was interesting. It wasn't, especially since Ward earlier on had felt like one of the weakest characters, and that was one place where you kind of wondered if it was because they were.
Very first gut reaction, I almost wanted to call it unfair that no, you kind of changed him. There was no evidence, and then the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, I thought, you get away with that.
And I think the next episode when you
and then
you
they
see
explain
him
a lot of stuff.
See his his reasoning behind doing certain doing certain things.
So that they pulled that off pretty well for being a like you would never have expected. But I'm sure if you rewatch it, you'd be like, okay, this is
So okay, well we're getting kind of long here, but
we hadn't planned for that.
Well, we did have the project update first.
Outline plan. I don't.
Okay, I get it. But anyway, like we're saying, a good mix of the two is a good thing to have, I think.
And if you tend toward outline, go for it, but just be willing to take. If something comes up, be willing to take it.
Take risks.
And if you happen to be more like me, do a lot of make it on the spot. Make it an effort, especially in your editing stage, to say, does this all fit?
Yes.
Is there ways we can make this tighter?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you can keep all the threads in your head, well, it works decent.
And remember, even J.R.R. Tolkien didn't know that Treebeard existed until he suddenly showed up in his book. So even the masters can get surprised by their own stories sometimes.
That's so awesome.
All right, so with all that said, let's go into our soundtrack. Okay, for our first soundtrack today, since we were talking about outlines and freeform and all that kind of stuff, I decided to go with some jazz improv. So, this is called Jazz Plumber Trio. It is remixed from the main theme of Super Mario Brothers, a very, very classic, well-known theme.
Yes.
So, to do some improv with it is, impressive feats. So they're playing it here for us at the radio place, but this was originally recorded by the one and only DJ Pretzel. So enjoy. And we're back.
Yes.
For reals.
For reals, we're back.
Hope you enjoyed that great jazziness.
Yeah.
Now it is time for our next segment, which is our take
on Tales.
All right, it's been a little while since we've done a normal take on Tales.
An official, solid, meaty, we're going to talk about stuff.
Gonna talk about stuff.
Stuff, lots of stuff, good stuff.
I mean, I think we've done stuff on we've done our take on Tales on summer movies and current TV shows, but the original idea of our take on Tales was talk about a specific book or a specific TV show or a specific movie or whatever.
Going a little more in depth.
Going a little more depth. So this time, that's what we're going to do. And Nick, why don't you start us off?
All right. Well, I have just recently read Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. I thought I'd try to read some Brandon Sanderson. If you don't know who he is, he's a fantasy writer. For me, most famous because of finishing up the Wheel of Time series, though he was famous before that for the Mistborn series, which I have not read and would like to. But I thought I'd start with some of his stuff that weren't ridiculously long to begin with because, well, it's in time investment. I want to work up to his Stormlight Archives, which is like Wheel of Time. Well, it's 2 books right now of 1,000 words, 1,000 pages each. So I read actually the Rithmatist before this, which was like his more of a young adult book. I think this is young adult. Steelheart is young adult, but Rithmatist seems a little younger.
Younger adulter.
Yeah, I guess, or less edgy or something. Well, I'll go both of them because I want to kind of contrast, compare. Because I only knew him from Wheel Time. And he was work with other people's characters. And he was working, in some cases, with stuff that was already written. So I'm like, I like this guy. I thought he did a really good job with Wheel Time. I want to read some more of his stuff. I know he's supposed to be really good at world building. I haven't read a good fantasy series for a while. So Rithmatist is about a world, kind of a steampunk America. But America's like lots of islands. Like a collection of islands as opposed to a full... But the magic in the world is chalk magic, where there's people called Rithmatists who can draw like... You draw a circle, and that's like a circle of warding, is like a shield. And then you can draw little like squiggly lines that will go and fly off and hit other people. And you can draw little chalklings, which are creatures go and attack another person's chalk stuff. And anyways, chalk magic, which at first I'm like, this is not going to be any... And it was cool. I mean, it's very limited, and then there's wild chalklings, which is why they have Rithmatists that are like these two-dimensional creatures, chalk creatures, that, you know, can go up you and eat off your flesh and stuff.
So with the chalk creatures, they're like 2D things that would get off the ground after you drew them?
No, they just fly, they go along the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not, they're flat.
Oh, so they're flat even when they're climbing on you and killing you. Okay.
Yeah. Like they'll climb on you flat-wise. Yeah, everything's 2D, which is kind of weird, but interesting world. Very interesting magic. There's all these diagrams in it of the different, there's duels, like Rithmatist duels, and all these defense things, and, you know, so obviously well thought out, very interesting. That book was odd because it seemed very lopsided. Like, the structure was just... It got kind of slow and bogged down in the middle, and there's a kind of this mystery. And then at the end, like the last 50 pages, like everything happens. Not only that, but like the last chapter, it's like big cliffhanger and like probably the most exciting scene in the whole book, which is cool, but I don't know, it just felt weird to me.
Imbalanced?
It felt imbalanced. Like, the last chapter is awesome. But simultaneously, you almost want to... Maybe not. Maybe if you're building a series, you want the best chapter at the end, so they want to read the next one, which I don't know when it comes out or if another one is coming out. But anyway, so that was that. So I really did enjoy it, but the last 50 pages are very, very good, and the others are very interesting. There's just kind of slow times and it meanders a bit, and like there's some revelation of world stuff, like 2/3 through the book, that you're not really sure how it relates, or it doesn't feel quite like a complete book yet. In some ways. And then Steelheart, which I just read, is basically the idea there's this thing called calamity, like this light in the sky that came, and then it started making people have superpowers. Except everyone who got superpowers turned out to be a bad guy. So there's only super villains.
Oh my.
Which is bad.
Yeah.
And Steelheart is this guy who now owns Chicago. And his powers are, basically he's invulnerable, and he can shoot like rays out of his hands, and he can fly, and he can turn things to steel. Like, all Chicago got turned to steel, like everything.
Oh, wow.
Well, living creatures can't be turned to steel, but anything, yeah. So if you're living, you can't be turned to steel.
Okay. So could he like, turn if he touches someone's clothes, could he turn that to steel?
I'm trying to remember. There's some sort of thing that if it's very close to a living person, it doesn't change as much or has a harder time changing.
Okay.
So there are rules about that.
Okay.
But anyways, you hear talk of a lot of different... There's Night Wielder who makes everything dark. Like, so Chicago's had no sun for 10 years. And like, everything's solid. And there's Firefight, who's this fire...
Wielder
Epic.
guy.
They call him epics.
Okay.
Anyway, so the main character... And everyone had... And just part of the thing of being an epic, having superpowers, that there is a weakness. And... Sometimes they're very odd weaknesses. So they make a mention at some point that there's some epic over in Ireland or something whose weakness like could only be killed by people who were like born in a certain month. But Steelheart, no one knows his weakness. Well, like there's an epic at the beginning that they try to kill. The Reckoners is a group trying to kill epics. He has a kind of precog, like he knows how to dodge right before a bullet hits him and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And his weakness is... I think his primary weakness is when he's distracted by pretty women. But also you can checkmate him. You can overload make him in such a way where no matter which way he moves, he can't escape.
Okay. Keep waiting for like the guy who has a weakness of like jelly donuts
I know,
or something.
But anyway, Steelheart, no one knows what his weakness is except the main character when he was like 10 years old, 8 years old, I guess, saw a bullet scratch him and leave a scar. So he knows that he saw something about his weakness, but he doesn't know what it is. And so the whole book's him joining the Reckoners and then working together to try to figure out what Steelheart's weakness is and hunt him down.
Oh, well, weird.
So cool concepts, great world, like, and Sanderson is very good at that from what I've read. I mean, the books I've read, not just secondhand heard. There's some scenes in this book that feel like they're straight out of, like they should be a movie scene. I mean, like some action scenes are really cool.
Yeah.
But my problem, not really problem, I really enjoyed the book, but I guess my thoughts or my wonderings at the end of it, like again, the last 50 pages or so, last 30 pages, there were a lot of twists and revelations, and like everything came into play that we'd heard previously. And it almost like there was, in some ways, like it's too much like a movie, if that makes any sense.
Oh, really?
I mean, like they're constantly twisting. Aha! This, you didn't know this was coming, and everything's set up perfectly fine. I mean, there's no error in the fact of how it's written. But for me, I almost like I didn't need everything to be a twist. I didn't need everything to be ha.
A big surprise.
Yeah, and for some things that I didn't, I just bought at face value earlier on, and then I shouldn't have, I guess, which is good writing. But part of me like, why can't any of this be? I don't know. It's almost like
when there's
it's almost like it's too clean. Like it's too, I don't know, too clean's the right word, but like, you know, like Chekhov's gun, everything that moves then has a purpose. Like sometimes they don't want everything to do that, if that makes any sense.
I think so.
And it's not, I'm not really mean to complain against the book because I really enjoyed it and I'll read the next one, but it was a lot of that crammed very close together. And it was also, I mean, it was set up, it's not like Deus Ex Machina or anything. Well, one of them, they set up, but you're kind of like, it works, but...
Do you think it was just because there was this accumulation of too many of these twists or just too many, like, in a row that did it?
Maybe. I mean, on the one hand, though, you can tell what you're going for is to just say, this is a great ending. And it is. You want to read it then. But, yeah, I wonder if almost too many different things. Or, like, maybe I didn't have enough curiosity, and so I wasn't impressed as much as they'd wanted me to be. Or I just looked at something... I don't know. And in both books... There's a case, and this is half spoiler, so if you're planning on reading, maybe I'll be vague, but there's someone who you trust who ends up having a dark secret that they're not really responsible for. Which is just a weird, I mean, it's a nice twist, like, aha, so you were, the good guy did do a bad thing, but he didn't mean to, it was by accident, or that sort of thing. I don't know. It's not unfair by any means, it's just sort of like in a mystery book, I might be like, okay, that makes sense because I'm trying to piece together a mystery. But it's like I'm not even trying to piece together this mystery with the same intent because I'm reading it for other reasons.
Okay, yeah.
Like my emotional focus, my thematic focus on here, and then I guess it should have been over here, and that might be more my problem than his.
I can see how that'd be this jarring, though.
Yeah, and it wasn't really jarring. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It just afterwards, I just felt like it was something worth trying to express, I guess. And I'd be interested in other people. Actually, I thought you might like this book because it's, superheroes and movie-ish.
All that kind of stuff, yeah.
Well, not heroes, super villains. But it's an entertaining book. The characters are great. The characters are fun. The world is really well put together. It reads really fast. There's genius action scenes that, I mean, you go into a movie super easy.
Cool.
So a lot of good, I mean, I'm not complaining against the book. I'm just kind of processing.
So do you think Steelheart might be the next Divergent?
I don't know. I mean, it certainly could be if it wanted to be. Now, there's only one book out right now. So they wouldn't probably pick it up that quick.
No, it might
Firefight comes out. That's the second one, comes out this fall, I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to read more Sanderson. I enjoyed the book. I'll read Firefight when it comes out. But it was just, I don't know. The two books together, I wish I'd give you more details without spoiling tons of stuff. Mm-hmm. Just odd endings a little bit. Or odder than I thought. And maybe that's how people work now, and I just write old school. I mean, because a lot of what I read, like Bradbury and Dostoevsky, and, right now I'm reading this, French Arthurian romance. I mean, I'm not your normal, super modern YA reader. Sure. So I could just be...
Well, you have to have Natasha read it.
I know. Well, she's going to. That's why I'm trying not to be vague, too, because she's nearby and she wants to read it.
Yeah, so. We'll have to see what she thinks about it.
We'll come back.
Cool. Well, and I'll be interested too to hear once you have to tell us sometime after if you do wind up reading one of his massive high fantasy 1,000-word books.
It'll be different.
1,000-page books, I should say.
Yeah, no, Kenny loves the Stormlight Archive, the giant one.
Okay.
And he's read Steelheart too, and I wanted to talk to him about it sometime, but I haven't had a chance to.
All right. Well, for mine, I wish I had a nice book or a really artsy movie I could talk about. But I don't necessarily. So I'll talk about instead a TV show that I don't think gets quite as much attention in like pop culture, nerdy culture, and that is Person of Interest, which I have talked on here about before. But I think last time I talked about it was toward the beginning of the TV season, and I've seen most of it this season, which is the first time I think. Because I used to I miss most of season 2.
Do you think because it's just kind of relegated to a crime, like a police drama, that people don't view it for its extra?
Well, see, that's the thing. I think people think it's just another crime police drama, but it's really not. It is on CBS, which is known for that sort of thing.
Crime broadcasting station.
But it really is. There's a whole lot more to it. If you don't know what Person of Interest is, I'll do a quick rundown. The initial setup of the show is that there's this guy, Harold Finch, who had created this massive computer system, surveillance system, that would tell the government of terrorist threats. It would, just take in tons and tons and tons of information, and it would come up with a threat. Sort of like what we found out the NSA was doing, except actually productive.
Yeah.
But the system would also categorize threats to civilians, not considered terrorist threats, but just other minor crimes and this sort of thing where a person's life was in danger, which I don't remember who they said the government agency was getting this information, but they weren't doing anything with. Well, this computer programmer, he built this back door into the system where he could get this information. But all the computer would send him would be the social security number of a person who would be involved in a violent crime, or at least would be suspected of being involved in a violent crime, whether that person is the victim or the perpetrator. He wouldn't know which. And he winds up recruiting this former special ops guy, played by Jim Caviezel. The character's name is John Reese, to basically go off and help protect these people. And it's always really interesting, each episode, because you wouldn't know whether the person they were shadowing would be the good guy or a bad guy. And sometimes you'd be convinced it was one way and it turned out to be another. So that's part of the fun part about it. But that's the initial setup. As the show has gone on, there've been some really interesting story arcs. In the mid-season finale, they wound up taking out, this is slightly spoilers, but there was a big arc involving this major corrupt crime ring in New York City. This pretty much all takes place in New York City. And it was initially mainly about these two guys, and since then they've added a couple detectives as allies. There's this other special ops girl that has done stuff, and then there was this recurring character that was originally quite a villain, kind of a psychotic hacker girl, but somehow the machine that was originally made developed kind of this consciousness, and it started communicating directly with this hacker girl. And it kind of reformed her in a weird sense. So it plays with all kinds of interesting science fiction ideas, a lot of current relevance, privacy ideas. I think you could probably call it a neo-noir sort of show, because, it's a lot of grays and kind of noir kind of looks, but it's neo in a sense that they're dealing with a lot of computer technology and all that kind of
Cyber-noir.
Cyber noir, I guess you could say. Yeah,
I like Neo better, but
of course. But no, it's just a really fun show, and like this season especially, well, with the big arc they had last time, and now they're in this arc where there's this other secret organization they apparently found out that around the same time that Finch had been developing his system, the government was hiring these other computer geniuses to work on another system, which didn't have nearly as many safeguards as Finch had built into the original one. So that's been a huge arc that they've been dealing with, and I mean, very suspenseful, and it's constantly surprising you is the other thing. You never know exactly where they're going to go, what card they're going to pull out next. I mean, and yet it doesn't feel like cheap in any way. Yeah. The main creator behind the show is Jonathan Nolan, who is Christopher Nolan's, the great Batman director. Hail Christopher Nolan. It's his brother. And
they work together on a lot of stuff, don't they?
They do work together
for writing purposes.
For writing purposes, yeah. I think Jonathan Nolan actually wrote Memento.
Okay.
if I remember right. So the writing is really good, and the characters are great because it has this very dry sense of humor sometimes. Because both Finch and Reese are these very withdrawn kind of individuals, which works well for their jobs. You know, they're in the shadows a lot of the time. And so sometimes you get these, you put them into these situations. Like I think one time the number that came up was this 4-month-old baby or something. So you got these two men that have to take care of it. Or then there was another more recent one where the two former special ops people, again both very hard nosed guys, they had to go undercover at a high school reunion, and the guy was constantly having women coming up and slap him without because he was taking on the personality of someone there, and he didn't know anything what was going on, and so it's got these little dry moments like that are just really fun, but a lot of great ideas they have built into the show.
That's one of those shows that I missed when it came on. And I'm like, I would like to have watched that, but I was watching other stuff, and I need to get to one of these days.
It's at a point now where I really feel like I would say this is a show you really should watch. Like before, I was like, yeah, this is a fun show if you have time to go see it. I'm like, no, if you enjoy 24, if you enjoy that kind of style of ongoing serial, I mean, go check it out, get it on DVD. Again, some of the earlier seasons I think focused more on the, like, you know, you had your
the day-to-day
the standalone things, but even those, like, it could really surprise you sometimes about some of the twists they pull with it. It's not your standard mystery cop show.
It seemed like I only watched 1 or 2 episodes, but it seemed like even the action scenes were very distinct for TV.
I'd say so. I mean, very well choreographed, I think. You definitely get the sense that this guy knows his stuff. He's not just, you know, it's because some cop shows you see, if it's an action-y cop show, you know, they jump out of explosions in the nick of time and all this kind of over-the-top stuff. And occasionally, sometimes you will start to question, okay, how is this detective being able to just show up at these crime scenes and people aren't asking him, hey, he doesn't seem to have much supervisor oversight, so they get away with a lot. But at the same time, you can tell that these guys are just so good at what they do. I don't just mean the writers, but I mean the characters themselves are just so good at what they do. You can kind of, you know, you see how they can get away with it.
Interesting.
So it's got a little bit of comic booky stuff, but it's a really intelligent show.
You have time for one more quick take on Tales?
Well, I had an idea for a quick one too, but what did you have?
Well, you said comic booky, and I've read recently. I want to read more of it. I recently read 7 issues of the Eternals. You ever heard of the Eternals?
I can't say that I have.
From the 70s. That's probably why.
Yeah.
But the reason I thought, anyways, Jack Kirby made it.
Oh.
Famous Jack Kirby from, you know, the heyday of Marvel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what was so fascinating is about, basically, it starts very quickly where the general idea is that they're on Earth, that the space gods came down. And
of course there are gods involved. Jack Kirby does gods stuff all the time.
Exactly. But anyways, so the space gods come down in the first episode, and it's the 4th time, and they're going to judge mankind after watching them for 50 years. And Jack Kirby has such a wonderful way of this epic way of writing and drawing. I mean, his drawings are just, you don't see much with that sense of wonder, that sense of like big, you know, old school science fiction had this sense that the space is big and exciting, and now a lot of science fiction is a little more realistic. But anyways, so on Earth there's actually 3 types of people. And 2 of them have been hiding forever. There's men, and then there's also the deviants, which are like ugly mutant things, and then the Eternals, which are basically where our ideas of like the gods came from, of like the Olympic gods and the Aztec gods.
Okay.
So it's very much, you know, kind of Babylon 5 deal of they've been here the whole time, and the deviants are where we get ideas of demons and stuff, and so they all come out. But what intrigues me most, I mean, it's a very 1970s comic, you know, over the top writing and bright pictures, and which is really quite exciting.
Exclamation points at the end of every sentence,
or 5. But they do it with such zeal. They do it, you know. Tim and I were talking off record one time about ironic. It's done with such honesty, such you know. The exclamation marks are not there to make fun of it. The exclamation marks because that's what they're like. This is big and important, and
they're excited about.
They're
doing
excited
that.
about it. Yeah, it's like and so just on that I like it. But what gets me more and more is that this idea that the gods are coming and they're judging, and this sense of how powerful, and I mean, obviously it's sci-fi, but you don't see very often kind of this sense of wonder and almost trembling in fear of great cosmic beings coming to judge you, and this sense that, and this constant idea that comes out that humans are more likely than not to fail because they always war, they always take the bad choice. It rings very true in some ways in their presentation of human nature and of how we would actually react to God. S.H.I.E.L.D'S in it, and they try to blow up the gods because that's what S.H.I.E.L.D. does. And but there's other people trying to change. Anyways, so besides just the cool 70s Jack Kirby vibe, just that underlying kind of what I feel like is at least a true version of the idea of sense of judgment and how people would react to different things. And this, it talks about big questions in a very comic booky sort of way. Not like it's trying to talk about big questions, it's just what it's doing.
Sure.
So there's I think they only made 17 issues or 19 issues, and I've read 7 of them. I want to read some more. And then Neil Gaiman apparently rebooted it for a couple of issues.
Oh wow!
7 issues later.
So did the series have an ending?
No, I think it just got stopped.
Oh,
so I don't know if Neil Gaiman tried to end it or wrap it up at all. I haven't read his
interesting.
Or just like a 7-issue miniseries.
I had not heard of that.
I'll bring back more when I finish it.
Something to check out. One quick thing I think we should talk about before we wrap up. Captain America, because we talk about superhero movies a lot, and it's not really a summer movie. We usually talk about all the summer movies at the end of the summer, but it was released at the beginning of April.
And we talk about S.H.I.E.L.D., so we might as well talk about Captain America.
Yeah, exactly. So, what did you think?
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I was talking with our friend Nathan the other day, and he has hierarchy. I can't compare Marvel movies anymore. I'm not like this is my favorite, but anyways, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Some of the action scenes were genius.
Oh man, the fights were fantastic.
The elevator scene and then him destroying the airplane with the motorcycle was awesome.
Definitely.
Black Widow was surprisingly awesome. I mean, like character wise, not just like she could beat people up.
Yeah.
It was a neat view of her character.
Sure.
I was happy that they didn't. I mean, obviously, I knew they were going to try to. Cap was going to try to turn Bucky. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to have to do that. But I'm glad it didn't happen right when he was trying to shut it off and have him change. It's just a little too cliche. I'm glad they did that. And then okay, we're going to deal with this.
Yeah.
And Nick Fury's fun.
Yeah. I enjoyed a lot of it. I will say, I think this is the first movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe that, as I left the theater, I was feeling kind of bummed. I know, because Thor ended a little bittersweet, but the first Captain America ended probably more bittersweet. But at the same time, at the end of it, you got that, Captain America is going to join the Avengers. Yeah. He's going to come back. We're going to have good times. This one, S.H.I.E.L.D. getting destroyed really kind of bothered me at first. I think because I'd kind of fallen in love with it from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. Because on that show, you see, because in the movies, S.H.I.E.L.D. could be kind of annoying sometimes. Yeah. They take all your research stuff and they'd give it back to you, if a god threatened you. but they could be kind of annoying. But in the TV show, you really got to kind of care about S.H.I.E.L.D. a lot, and they showed how they had sacrificed a lot. The nice
thing about the show is that they really did constantly push the idea that S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of two-sided even before this came out, though.
Yeah.
Which was not... I mean, that was a good setup on their part for the TV show.
No, they certainly... like I said, and there were definitely some bad aspects to S.H.I.E.L.D. before that.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
I don't know. I sometimes wonder... At first, I'm like, how did so many Hydra get in there? And then the more I thought about it, and really, at that point, people who would be in Hydra and people who would be in S.H.I.E.L.D., they're getting the same information, but for different reasons. I mean...
Yeah.
There's a very thin line between
doing that for a good reason and doing it for a twisted reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. So
no, I can see being distraught, but because it blows up a major aspect of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and one potential problem I had, which I don't know that I've heard really anyone talk about, is this is a Captain America movie. Does the Cap really grow during it? Because it seems like he ends the movie with some of the same questions and problems that he starts with.
You know what? I would say that was actually and I might be misremembering, a kind of a problem with Thor 2. I didn't think Thor had much arc in Thor 2 either. It was more about Loki in some ways.
Well, that's okay. That's a fair point. I guess I didn't mind it as much as in Thor because Thor didn't really seem to start the movie with a whole lot of problems, except missing his girlfriend.
Yeah, and it worked for the movie, but Natasha enjoys the first Thor more because Thor grew.
Yeah.
Thor 2, there's kind of this whole, like, taking charge of the kingdom thing, but it doesn't feel, you don't connect with it deeply like you
would with, that's
or
true.
as deeply. And I think, if nothing else, I think Captain America, if there's a growth, and not so much for the growth as the fact that he realizes there's still something for him to do.
Yeah. Well, which he kind of had that in the beginning.
But he felt like he was just following orders. He wasn't making good.
A personal choice. It's possible. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what they were going for. Whether it felt like that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, if they keep, apparently the guy who plays Bucky has a 9-movie contract.
Seriously?
With Marvel. I just read that this week.
9 movie?
He's been in 2 or 3 so far.
Holy cow. Well, I know Marvel has like huge plans for the cinematic universe.
So my guess is your next Captain America will probably have Winter Soldier and have a lot more.
And that's kind of what I realized too, in the sense of, I think there's a lot of my dissatisfaction with the movie will be, if they deal with it in an interesting way in future movies and stuff, then it will be okay. I mean, Dark Knight was that way. I was very dissatisfied with the ending of Dark Knight, and then it fed right into Dark Knight Rises, which I really appreciated.
It is interesting that the movies are almost, they're movies, but they're also episodes at this point.
They really are.
I mean, to process them fully. I mean, I think it's a valid thing to say, hey, Cap didn't grow much in this movie, and say that was a weakness or it could have been done better, but and maybe that's just a weakness for what they want to get done in Captain America, which might be, maybe they just wanted to destroy S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean...
I'm really curious where that idea came from, and how, I'm sure there was a lot of talk in the writers' rooms about that.
Yeah.
So, all right, well...
Yeah, we're running along here, so we better get moving.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing that we have short soundtracks today.
Yes, it is.
All right, so Nick, what's our website?
Our website is derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
Our email address is derailedtrains@gmail.com.
Please subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave us comments on our website.
And all of our uncut episodes, of course, are available at mixlr.com/derailedtrainsofthought. That's Mixlr, MIXLR.
And you'll hear little things that get scrubbed out later.
Nothing too bad.
No, not that much. I think we gotta get moving here. This sounds like there's just more screaming going on in this radio station. The typewriter guys they've been running pages of a script down like every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it seems kind of chaotic.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't emulate ourselves after these guys.
No, these guys seem like they're only by the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
No outline at all. Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's time for your soundtrack.
Okay,
Nick.
so my soundtrack is remixed by Schnobulba. We're going to attempt that's his name. It's remixed from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original game, which was on Nintendo. It's called Jamming with My Ness, I believe. But basically, they didn't have a name. It's from an album called Ness Jams, which is genius, and I don't know why I haven't bought it. When I found this song again, I'm like, why did I have not bought this? Anyways, it's him playing piano, and he plays it he's a genius piano player, very fluid, mixed with chip tune, and it's pretty slick. So please enjoy.
Cool. All right, here we go. Thanks, folks. We will
see you
soon. This has been Tim.
This is Nick.
And bye-bye.
Signing off.